Hey guys, my name's Ollie, and in this video I'm going to teach you how to create this character in Adobe Illustrator. So if we jump into Illustrator, this is going to be the character that I'm replicating for you guys today. What I'll do is just drag this over to the left. So the first thing we want to do is add our color palette. I have my 4 colors here that I wish to use. I head to the swatches panel and select new color group. You can add a name if you wish here, and then press OK. The next thing I'm going to do is drag in my sketch file. Then hold shift on the keyboard and grabbing one of the corners, I will then reduce the size of the image. Then if we head to the layers panel, I'm going to head to the bottom and select create new layer. I'll then double click on the layer and rename it to say sketch. I want my image to be in the sketch layer, so I'll open the example layer and drag my image into the sketch layer. Then selecting my image, I head to opacity and reduce the number to around 30%. Now let's lock those 2 layers. Finally, I add a new layer and double click on that and call this outline. So to begin, I want to draw the basic outlines of the shape that we have here. I head over to the fill and stroke. I remove the fill, leaving just a black stroke. Then head up to stroke. I want to round my cap and my corners. Then I will increase the weight to around 8 points. Then select the pen tool. I zoom in, pressing Command or Control and plus on the keyboard. Holding down the spacebar, I can then drag across the artboard. I'll then click to draw straight lines around the basic shape of the character. This is just the basic frame for now. Once this is done, we can then start going in and adding more of the detail. Now we have the basic shape done, let's begin with the eyes. If we head to the left hand panel and then select the ellipse tool, I'll then drag out my first circle. My goal here is to then align my circle to the top of the sketch that I created. Then head back over to the left hand panel and select the rotate tool. By default, the rotation axis is aligned to the center of the shape. I'll move that to the top of the shape and then drag the shape clockwise to rotate it. I'll then go back to the selection tool to edit the size of the circle. Now we have the first eye done, let's create the second. To do this, grab the first eye, then hold in Option or Alt on the keyboard, drag across a second circle. Now select the first circle again, and right click copy and then paste in front. Now let's right click again, then go down to arrange and then bring to front. Now select both the circles, then in the Pathfinder panel select minus front. Next up, let's add the shape for the pupils of the eyes. To do this, I once again right click, copy and paste in front. I then grab the center of the bounding box and whilst holding shift, I'll drag to reduce the size of the circle. I'll then move the circle down so it matches the bottom of the bigger circle. And then once again, using the rotate tool, I'll move the center axis to the bottom and rotate the circle slightly. To create the eyelids, I'm going to use the pen tool. Start by clicking on one side of the circle and then clicking on the second side, but before releasing the click, I drag using my mouse, which creates a curve on the path. This time to remove that overlap, I'm going to use the Shape Builder tool. To do this, head over to the left hand panel and select the Shape Builder tool. Then hold Option or Alt on the keyboard and drag over the overlap to remove the path. Finally, to finish off the eye, I like to add this subtle indent. To do this, I'm going to use the pen tool, or that's P on the keyboard. When I hover over the part, you can see that the plus sign appears. That means I can now add additional anchors. I now add 2 anchors to either side of the middle one. Then select A, which is the shortcut for direct selection tool, and drag in that middle anchor point to create the indent. With the eye finished, I'll now head over to the left hand panel and switch the outline to a fill. Then with the eye and the eyelid selected, I'll use Option or Alt on the keyboard to drag across a duplicate. If I zoom in here, you can see that the eyelid path is now overlapping with the eye path. To remove this, we can use the scissor tool. Simply head over to the eraser panel and then select Scissors tool. To use the scissors tool, simply head over to where the 2 paths are intersecting. Click once to cut the overlapping path, then delete the unneeded path. Next up, let's create a mouth. I'll grab the ellipse tool and draw out another circle. I'll then copy and paste that circle and drag in whilst holding Option and Shift to maintain its shape. Then to create the lines on either side of the mouth, I'll use the pen tool. Holding and dragging again to create those curves. The same again for the bottom. Now for the center of the mouth, I'm going to change this from a stroke to a fill. And then using the scissors tool, I will then cut to open the circle. The cheeks, I grab the ellipse tool, holding down Option or Alt and Shift to create a perfect circle. Then once again grabbing the scissors tool to open up the path. Holding Option or Alt, I then drag across a duplicate for the second cheek. I then slightly rotate the shape to match the sketch. Now select the cheek path on both of the eyes. Then in the left hand, select the Shape Builder tool. Then holding down Alt, remove the excess eye. The last thing left is to draw the eyebrows. For this, I grab the pen tool and draw a straight line. Then hold Option or Alt on the keyboard to drag up a curve on my path. Then replicate the same thing for the second eyebrow. So that's the features done. So far it's looking good. The next thing we're going to want to jump onto is the hand. So I zoom in here, once again using the space bar to move around the artboard. For the hand, I'm going to go with the pen tool. Then all I'm going to do is click and follow my paths around the sketch. One thing that's important with the pen tool is to not click too excessively and create too many anchor points. We're looking for nice smooth curves across our paths. As you can see, I'm not closing my paths, so there will be some overlaps. I will show you how to adjust this in a moment. To adjust your shape, simply select the direct selection tool and using the handles, adjust the path. I will now speed up as I finished outlining the rest of the hand. So that's the outline for the hand done, and as you can see there are some overlapping paths and things that aren't quite connected. So the way that we're going to now edit this will be through using the outline tool. Simply head up to View and then Outline, and the keyboard shortcut for this is Command or Control Y. Outline mode allows you to view your artwork as simple vector paths, which is great for when it comes to editing accurately. What I'll do now is use the direct selection tool to align my paths to one another to ensure there's no gaps in my artwork. For the overlapping paths, I'll once again use the scissor tool. Once you're ready to come out of outline mode, simply press Command or Control Y. Now let's jump on to the arm. Once again, to do this, head over to the pen tool and create two paths connecting the body to the hand. Now we want to increase the thickness of the stroke, so we head up to the stroke panel and then hold Shift, then use the arrow keys to increase the stroke size. We now want to expand this stroke, so we head up to Object and Expand, then press OK. Now head to the eyedropper tool and then click on one of your stroke lines to copy its attributes. Now once again, to remove the overlapping paths, I will use the scissor tool. Now with the first arm done, I'll follow the same techniques to create the second arm. With the arms finished, now next thing I'm going to do is jump onto the legs. With the legs done, let's head up to the top of the carton here and draw these lines. To do this, I head to the pen tool and draw my first line on the far end, and then draw a second line on the other end of the carton. Now select both the lines, then over in the left hand panel, select the blend option mode. Change spacing from smooth colors to specific steps, and here you can adjust how many steps you would like in between each of your paths. I think 8 works here, so I'll press OK. I then head up to Object, Blend, Make. And here you can see that they now have created the paths within the 2 lines that we currently made. But once you're happy with this, simply go up to Object and Expand. Now these are all separate paths that you can use. If you ungroup them, as you can see, they're all separate paths. I'll now follow the same process with the lines on the body of the carton. Cool. So now we've got the outline done, let's go in and start adding that colour. So now what we're going to want to do is head over to the layers panel and add a new layer, double click on the name and rename that to be called fill. Then going to drag that below the outline Select your outline, select copy, then go and select the fill layer, then head back over and select paste in place. But what that's done is giving you the outline is now put within the fill section. So for the fill, what we're going to do, we're going to use the live paint bucket tool. To do that, we simply let's lock the outline, then head to the live paint bucket tool, and as you can see here, we now have colors that are that we can change based on the arrow keys that we have on our keyboard, and all these are the colors that we currently have in our swatch panel, if you see on the right hand side here. So what I will now do is, following my existing design, I'm just going to color in the outline by simply clicking into the shape . So that has coloured in my artwork for me. I can now remove this outline, and as you can see, we now have the outline on one layer and the fill on a separate layer. Once you're finished with live paint, all you need to do is just select your design, then on the top panel select expand. From here, you can just simply right click and ungroup. And then as you can see, we then have the individual fills for us to be able to edit if we wish. So at this point, if you're happy, you could quite easily leave this character as it is. If you look over at my example, I've added some halftoners and some shading and highlights just to give the character some more depth. So that's what I'm going to do for this next step. So I just want to grab the outlines, but as you can see, everything's sitting on its own path. So instead of selecting each thing individually, I can head to my layers panel and click in that circle that will select everything within that layer. From here, I then head up to Object and Expand. I then press OK. And what this has done now is expanded our strokes into filled paths. So from here, I then head over to the Pathfinder panel, and under Shape Mode, I want to select Unite. And what this has done is combined all of those shapes into one consistent shape. Now, the reason I've done that is because what I quite like to do with my characters is sort of round off some of those straight edges. So the easiest way to do this is to simply head over to the Direct Selection tool, and selecting on those anchors and the edges, select that little circle there, and what's that going to do is going to curve in that shape as much as you can. I'm just going to do a subtle curve on each of mine, and it just sort of makes things look a little bit more fluid, not quite so rigid. So I'll now head through my design and just curve off some of those straight edges that we have. So as you can see, I've just finished rounding off some of the corners, and it's only a small difference, but I just think it adds quite a nice little touch to the overall character aesthetic. So the next step is going to be to add that halftone shading that I have. To do this, I'm going to head over to my layers panel again, create new layer, drag that underneath outline, and rename that to say halftone. We won't need the outline layer for this step, so I'm going to lock that. I'm then going to head up to Effects and Document Raster Effects Settings. Under Resolution, I'm going to change 72 ppi to 150 or 300. 150 should be fine for this though, and then press OK. I'm now going to head over to my fill layer, selecting that circle to grab everything that sits within that layer. I'm going to copy this, then select my halftone layer, and then right click, paste in place. Now let's lock the fill layer, as we're not going to need that for this step. So now we can start by adding some of these halftones. So I'm going to grab these two shapes that I have here, and I'm going to head over to the Pathfinder tool and unite those two together. And this has now merged those two shapes into one shape. So to add halftones, we're going to want to use the gradient tool. So if we head up to Windows and head down and select that gradient panel. So now with our shape selected, we can head over to the gradient slider, and by clicking that, we will then apply a gradient to our fill. Now let's head up to Effect, Pixelate, Color Halftone. The important part here is to ensure that each of the channels are the same number. It doesn't necessarily matter which number, but just keep those all equally the same. Max radius determines the size of the circles of your halftones. So the smaller the number, the smaller the circles are. So if I press OK here, as you can see, the size of the circles are very small. I'm just going to undo that and then head back into color halftone. I'm going to increase this to maybe 28 to see how that looks. That's a little bit better. I think maybe too big now. If I head to my appearance panel, I can then select my color halftone here as well. I think 24 would be a good size for this. Yeah, that's more like it, I think. So now that I'm happy with the halftone size, I can still make some small amendments to the angles and directions of the halftone. So if I head to the left hand panel and select gradient, or that's G for shortcut, dragging using my mouse, I can now change the direction of the halftone to suit the kind of style that I'm looking for. The white of the gradient being the smallest of the circles and black being the biggest. Now that I'm happy with my gradient direction overall, I'm going to head up to Object, and now expand appearance and rasterize both do the same thing in this step. So you can choose either in this option. I'm just going to select rasterize and keep your resolution at 300 ppi, then press OK. And what this has done now is converted our vector into a bitmap. So our next step now is to convert this back to a vector form. To do this, we head up to Image Trace. Then along the top panel, we want to select the Image Trace panel. Here, the important one for us out of all of this is the Ignore Color. If we tick that box, that's going to remove all of the white from our halftone, which is exactly what we want. Then press Expand. So now, as you can see, we have our halftone back as a vectored form. So at this point, we can now change the colors if we want. We can make any amendments to this as we now have this back as a vector. So using that method, I'm now going to add the halftone shading to the rest of the character. So I've just finished off with all of the halftones and everything's looking great. There's just a couple more steps to go and then I'm finished with this illustration. So the next thing I want to do is just add in a few more of those details, the shadows and the highlights like I have in the example here. So I'm going to head back over to the layers panel and lock that halftone layer, then unlock the fill layer so that we can now start adding more details into the fill section. So the good thing here is because we've layered our artwork correctly, it means that we can now add these shadows and they're going to sit behind the outline that we had originally. This means that we don't have to be crazy accurate with our shadows. As long as they sit behind that black outline, no mistakes will show up. So I'll quickly fast forward this section here as I'm just adding in the final few details of the design. So the highlights and the details have just been added in, and it helps give this character just a little bit more depth. So we're down to the final section here, which is now just adding this platform for the character to be walking on. To create this, we simply head over to the left hand panel and select the ellipse tool. Then simply drag a circle underneath the feet of the character. Then using the eyedropper tool, I select the black that I'm using for the character to make a fill for the circle. Then we can right click, head down to arrange and then center back. So if we zoom in here, the next thing that we want to do is try to add that sort of grass effect. So if we head over to the left hand panel and select the pencil tool, then we're just going to draw a couple of grass leaves. Then using the eyedropper tool to grab that black fill. Head across to the other side of the circle and then repeat the same action. Now select both of your grass leaves and the circle, then head over to the Pathfinder panel and select Unite. This is going to bring the shape back to the top of the layer, so once again right click, arrange and center back. Now the last thing we want to do is cut away a little bit on the platform just so we can see the feet better. To do this, we're going to slightly offset the character. So if we head over to our layers panel and unlock our outline layer, then on the right hand side press that circle to select all of the objects within that layer. Now head over to our character and right click copy, then paste it in front. Then if we head to the Pathfinder window, we then want to go down to merge and then unite. And what this has done is merged all of our shapes together and made one fill. So we can now head up to object, path, and then offset path. And here we can offset the path to around 16 pixels, then press OK. This will create a duplicate, so delete that first shape. Then we want to select the character fill as well as the bottom platform that we've created. Head over to the shape builder tool. Then whilst holding Option or Alt, simply delete where the two shapes overlap. So now that we have everything done here, there's only one final thing that I like to do just to finish off my designs, and that's to add a slight roughen effect to the characters, just to make them look a little bit more hand-drawn. And thankfully there's a really easy way that we can do this. So to begin with, let's make sure that all of the layers that we need are unlocked. Then drag over the artboard to select everything from the 3 layers. Then what we want to do is head up to Effects, Distort and Transform, and Roughen. Now I know this looks scary, I'm not entirely sure why Adobe uses these options as default, but if we reduce the size down to around 1%, then change relative to absolute, and then finally change our points from corner to smooth, then press OK. If we now zoom in here, we can see that there is this nice roughened effect that we've added to our character. And there we have it. This is how I create my characters using Adobe Illustrator. Hopefully it was helpful and you managed to get some new tips and tricks for when you create your own characters. If you found it useful, then please make sure to like, comment and subscribe. Until then, I'll see you in the next one.